Stormborn by Black K. Cat. Chapter 14, Second Movement. Sonatina for the Sleepless. Stretto. Sonatina. A short or brief sonata. Stretto. Pertaining to the fugue, the overlapping of the same theme or motif by two or more voices a few beats apart.
You're going to do something reckless, aren't you?
Kurama hubs. Despite the phrasing, it's not actually a question. Naruto rolls his eyes, adding one final line to the seal carved into the tree trunk in front of him. There are 6 more seals, 6 more trees, set in a circle with Naruto's seals on the side of the trunk facing out. After so many times going over this in his head, secret from Haku, from Gaara, from Mutakata, and anyone else who might feel the need to point out all of the risks, even when Naruto has thought of every single one already, it was barely the work of 10 minutes to set up the barrier. More of Saihara-sensei's favored mood modifiers, combined with seals to affect the mind and redirect attention elsewhere. Don't look, is the message they give. Don't look, don't pause, there's nothing to see. Reckless implies that I haven't considered all possible outcomes, he points out, grateful for the lack of company that lets him answer aloud without feeling like a schizophrenic. Come on, I even got Orochimaru to distract Ero Zenin. That's forward thinking, thank you.
No, reckless implies that it's a stupid plan with too many variables and risks involved,
Kurama counters.
And the snake is and always will be a creep.
Did you and Haku trade off on babysitting duty or something? Naruto grumbles, sliding through the barrier and reaching for the sealing scroll he keeps in his left sleeve. A single drop of blood and then a heavy wooden shaft settles in his hand, the butt capped with iron and the other end topped with 40 centimeters of perfectly honed blade, the steel shining blue in the moonlight. Arashi's Najinata, Saji, recovered from the ruins as they rebuilt, and Naruto welcomes it to his hand like an extension of his arm, sweeping it out in a wide circle and allowing himself one flamboyant spin over his head before he resettles his grip with a grin. The Najinata is considered a woman's weapon primarily, but Naruto, like Arashi, isn't exactly a towering specimen of masculine stature and strength. He's honestly kind of short. And he'll never have Sasuke or Kakashi's reach. Quick and tricky and unpredictable are his biggest assets, and Saji amplifies all of that. It fits his hand, fits his fighting style, keeps him at a distance so he can make use of his chakra reserves and hammer an opponent with jutsus, but also allows him to duck in close enough to use seals, which can be laid with skin contact. 4 long sweeps of the capped butt, and a design is taking place on the packed earth, cleared of leaf fall for this reason. It's large, almost 2 meters across, but deceptively simple. Once Naruto activates it, it will start bleeding a specific type of chakra into the air, chakra tied to him, but in amounts just small enough that not even the Hyuga clan will notice it. There are 10 days until the first of the month, 10 days until the Chunin exams start, and that means he has 7 days before it's time to activate the transportation seals he carried here with him, allowing the 4 teams to pass through to Konoha. 7 days. 10 at the very most, to find evidence of what Danzo's hiding and deliver it to Tsunade tied up with a big red bow. 7 days. Of course he's going to be reckless. But Haku is out of the line of fire, and everyone else vulnerable is still safely tucked away behind Uzushio's nearly unbreakable barrier. He's got room for recklessness now, even if he hasn't since he first became Uzukage. A step back lets him take in the entirety of the design, the outer boundary complete. And done in broad strokes, thick twisting lines through the dirt, and with a satisfied nod, Naruto flips Saji over to use the long blade for the intricate detail work necessary for the interior.
Not to underestimate the old geezer, but don't you think this is a bit excessive?
Kurama questions, gruff but interested. There's a slight flare of chakra that means he's looking through Naruto's eyes, studying the design of the seal. There's no kill like overkill, Naruto counters tearfully, flickering through the lines needed for the output template and starting on the conversion matrix. There's no hesitation, no pause. He's had this all laid out in his head for weeks now. Besides, Danzo has all of Root. I've got a grumpy demon fox, a couple of jutsus, and some seals. It's always good to have other options.
You make it sound like you actually think out plans beyond just attack relentlessly until it's dead, or barring that, talk until it regrets its whole life and repents.
Don't act like you're not a part of this decision-making process, Kurama. If you don't like my plans, you're more than capable of speaking up. And wasn't it you egging me on last time we were on a mission? Kurama huffs haughtily.
I am a wise and noble spirit of power taught by the sage of six paths himself. I've got much better things to do with my time than critique your so-called plans, fish cake.
Don't call me fish cake! At least I'm not scared of a girl!
I'm sorry to be the one to bring this to you, Brad, but your mother is a monster. The fact that you aren't scared of her, even her chakra impression, just means that it's genetic or catching.
Kurama, stop making my mother sound like some kind of a disease! The field of chakra, tightly contained and tamped down as it is a nostalgic one. As familiar as his childhood, Jiraiya follows it because that's what he's always done. Follows it past the Hokage mountain and into the cool of the nighttime woods. There's a flicker ahead of him, cream-colored cloth half covered by long black hair, pale skin in the moonlight, and Jiraiya picks up his pace until he's nearly running through the darkened trees. It's not necessary, though. When he bursts into a clearing, one step away from calling up a toad and preparing for combat, he finds Orochimaru waiting. The snake sage is seated on a boulder in the faint half-light. No weapons or summons to be seen, and he looks almost peaceful. Jiraiya hasn't seen him look peaceful in a very, very long time. Twisted or cunning or furious or murderous, yes, but never like this. Not since well before he fled the village. Never at ease the way he is now. It's staggering. Jiraiya? Orochimaru says softly, inclining his head as though it's absolutely normal for them to run across each other just a mile from Konoha's walls. You're a long way from Rice Country, Orochimaru, Jiraiya says at length. Orochimaru doesn't move, doesn't even rise, though he would most certainly be at a disadvantage here if Jiraiya chose to attack. I have information I wished to pass on to you, and I assumed it would be easier for you to believe me if I delivered it in person. Jiraiya thinks he is entirely entitled to the flatly skeptical look he levels at his former teammate. In response, Orochimaru rolls his eyes in that supercilious, arrogant gesture that always drove Jiraiya nuts when they were kids. He says, incredibly put upon, and offers, You've been tracking Akatsuki since I left Jiraiya, but you've never gotten anywhere. You don't even know the leader or where they're based. But I have been convinced that it would be beneficial if I were to share what I know. It's funny that for someone as quiet as Orochimaru always has been, Jiraiya's never heard him use 5 words when 20 would do. With an eye roll of his own, he takes 4 deliberate steps closer and says dubiously, Oh, really? Orochimaru looks at him for a long moment, golden eyes calculating, and then huffs grandly, like the dramatic jerk he is, shakes back one of his long sleeves, and offers Jiraiya his hand. Palm up. Jiraiya gives him a wary look, but takes another 2 steps forward. It's just a hand. Slender and long-fingered and elegant, with the calluses that any shinobi worth their kunai has. The moonlight is bright enough for Jiraiya to pick out the faint discoloration of scars, and one scar in particular. A long, narrow slash from the center of Orochimaru's palm that runs all the way up to the middle of his forearm, just missing the major veins in his wrist. That, too, is utterly familiar, a souvenir from one of their first missions as Chunin, and Jiraiya hasn't actually seen it in years now. He narrows his eyes in suspicion, then glances up at Orochimaru with something akin to disbelief bubbling in his chest. Surely it's not... My original body, yes, Orochimaru says, because he's a jerk and has always made a game of defying Jiraiya's expectations, good or bad. There was a lack of suitable hosts last time I required one, and our darling Uzukage managed to get out of my minions that I had reserved this one. He stuffed me back in it, sealed my soul here, and informed me of the error of my ways. He withdraws his hands with a faint grimace. The man is absolutely ridiculous, just as much as he was when we were children. Jiraiya's knees feel suspiciously unsteady. He takes a deep breath and sinks to the ground, settling cross-legged and dragging a hand over his face. Arashi? He asks after a pause. Orochimaru arches one elegant brow at him. He's hardly gone to pains to hide it, I imagine. But yes, the Arashi you remember is currently in charge of Uzushio. he hesitates, noticeable in that he never hesitates, and then says carefully, I have been reminded that my original goals are still within reach, and rather more plausible than I had come to think. Holding a conversation with Orochimaru is and always has been an exercise in hearing things unsaid and reading between the lines. Jiraiya frowns, sorting through things. He knows Orochimaru's original goals. He wanted to live to see his parents reincarnated. That fell by the wayside years ago, though. His hopes of predicting or identifying reincarnations lost to the lack of concrete evidence, but Uzumaki Arashi is still in charge of his village, even though the whole world thought him dead. But Orochimaru believes in reincarnation again, really believes in it if this apparent peace within himself is anything to go by. And there's only one conclusion Jiraiya can draw from that. He breathes out, long and slow, and resists the urge to pinch himself. This is just surreal. I'd accuse you of pulling my leg, but I don't think even you have enough imagination for something like this. Orochimaru inclines his head, and if Jiraiya didn't know better, he'd say that there was a faint wry smile tugging at one corner of his mouth. Another reminder of their childhood, of simpler times. And maybe Jiraiya should be more doubtful. Maybe he should take a step back and a step away. But the Orochimaru in front of him right now has lost the overtones of madness that he's been carrying for decades. There's no edge of manic anger, no thread of insanity in golden eyes, and while maybe it's not alright, not even close. Sarutobi, sensei, he thinks, with a pang and a bite of furious, grudging hurt. It's better. Better than it has been in a long time. Jiraiya can work with better. Right, he says firmly, shaking off his thoughts and focusing on the man in front of him. You said you had information about the Akatsuki? Orochimaru's eyes seem to glow in the darkness as he slides off his boulder, settling on the ground across from Jiraiya. Moonlight catches on the planes of his face, the curve of one ear, glitters over the tomo-shaped earring there, and then slides like liquid silver across the uninterrupted darkness of his hair. Yes, he says, and that's the Orochimaru Jiraiya remembers from missions as a child, as a teenager, before Dan and Iwaki's deaths, Tsunade's departure, and Sarutobi picking Minato as his successor broke some thread of sanity within him. Languid and deadly as a viper, fiercely focused, even though he hides it behind a smirk and a slanted look. Tell me, Jiraiya, what do you know about Uchiha Madara? Sasuke wakes to a sky already covered by encroaching clouds, low and heavy, and the taste of coming rain like quicksilver on the back of his tongue. The air is still and muggy, humid enough to leave him feeling irritable and miserable in equal measure. For a very long moment, he debates the merits of simply not leaving his bed until nightfall, shift at the mission assignment desk, be screwed. But then he recalls that he's still paired with Ino, and she will never let him get away with skipping out. Not only that, but she'll hunt him down, drag him out into the street in his boxers, and proceed to gleefully torture him until he repents the great sin of abandoning her to an entire shift of mind-numbing boredom. Sometimes Sasuke thinks longingly of the days when her only goal in life was pleasing him. With a sigh and a grimace, Sasuke gives in to the inevitable and levers himself out from underneath the sweat-sticky sheet, tossing it back and stalking his way to the bathroom for a quick cold shower. The rush of water is a small relief that's over too soon, and he forgoes his usual uniform for a dark blue tank top under his jointed vest and his lightest pair of pants. He hates humidity. Even coffee is too much heat to bear, and he putters around the kitchen for a moment at a loss for what to do with the extra 20 minutes not making it gives him. Once Sasuke catches himself stuffing his head in the freezer for the third time, though, he reluctantly skulks out of his apartment, joining the morning crowd in the streets. His bare Ambu tattoo gets him a few extra looks, as does the tank top, but Sasuke ignores the gawkers with an ease of long practice as he heads for the Yamanaka flower shop. He's halfway there when a peal of gut-wrenchingly familiar laughter freezes him in his tracks. Sasuke very nearly staggers hearing that sound. It's like his legs have been cut out from under him, like gravity has suddenly spun away beneath his feet, and all that's left is a tearing, aching recognition that goes soul deep and then boils upwards to his heart, because for nearly 7 years now, he's been listening for that exact same laugh everywhere, on every mission, and in every place he's ever visited. It's haunted him more than Itachi's last words that night, more than his brother's shadow in the village, more than standing before the shrine ever has, because it's Naruto! And how can it not? He jerks around toward the source of the sound, heart beating a double-time tattoo in his chest as he scans the street for spiky blonde hair and tan skin, and there, a flash of gold, but it's about 3 shades too pale. The skin 3 shades too dark. And how in the name of all things sacred does Yoko have a Naruto's laugh? Dreaming, Sasuke tells himself sharply. You're dreaming or you've gone insane. It can't. But then it comes again, bright and loud and freer than anything else could ever be, just the way Sasuke remembers it, except that the one it's coming from is Yoko, and that's impossible. Absolutely impossible, because Yoko carries himself differently, doesn't blurt out his thoughts, or recklessly charge forward, or grin naively at everything under the sun. He doesn't scratch the back of his head in sheepish embarrassment when Sasuke arches a brow at him. A puff of indignation under Tsunade's skeptical eyes, doesn't sling an arm around Sasuke's shoulders in uncomplicated friendship the way no one else. It's not Naruto, but he's talking to Iruka. He's talking to Iruka like they're old friends. Standing off to one side of the street and tucked back between 2 stores' displays, Iruka is in uniform like always, and Yoko is sporting another short kimono, this time in a bright sea blue, but the blonde is wearing it differently, just slightly, and it's nothing Sasuke would have noticed without something else to draw his attention, but he can't help but be reminded of the time Sakura dragged him to a festival and Naruto tagged along. They had played games and relaxed, as much as Sasuke ever allowed himself to relax then, and for a very, very brief handful of hours they had been children instead of shinobi. Naruto had worn a kimono, clearly secondhand and even more clearly borrowed from Kiba if the light covering of dog hair was any indication, and he'd looked easy. Not like Sasuke would have expected him to look, given that it was his first time wearing formal clothes. The way he moved, the way he'd held himself, it had spoken of innate grace, all too rarely seen, economy of motion, and an understanding of his own body that no Genin had. When he first arrived, Yoko had carried himself rather like Kakashi, languid and at ease and carefree, but only on the surface. Beneath the facade had been tension and hesitation and wariness, just what Sasuke would have expected from a foreign nin approaching a power with whom their welcome was uncertain. Now Yoko moves like Naruto did that night. Sasuke can see it in the flicker of his hands as he talks, the tilt of his head when he ostensibly grins up at the Chunin. He pinpoints it in the shift of his feet before he takes a step, the way a hand casually brushes the long blonde hair. Son, Sasuke thinks, and feels like the world's greatest fool for not seeing earlier. Sun and light reflecting off water, and how much faster would that make a person's skin darken? How much faster would that be at bleaching a person's hair 3 shades lighter? How much of a change would that make after almost 7 years of constant exposure? Out of his face and touches the back of his head, a shadow of the familiar motion Sasuke has sought in crowds time and again. How much of Yoko's careful diplomatic poise was an act? How much was affected just to further distance himself from the rambunctious blonde who disappeared with Haku and then returned with Yuki? Sasuke is Anbu! He's supposed to be smarter than this! Another laugh, a tip of Yoko's head, and Yoko, Sasuke thinks, and the pieces are falling together, more than falling, they're flying into place like kunai hurled at a target. What was it he said when Uno asked him about his name? Yoko is a girl's name? Among other things. Yoko, Fox Spirit, Kitsune, the Kiyumi, no, Kitsune. The only way he could have been more blatant about it was if he actually called himself Fox. He hadn't even admitted to being in Uzumaki until his persona was firmly established in everyone's mind, and Sasuke had fallen for it. Had fallen for green eyes because he'd been so set on seeing blue, so set on finding Naruto that he hadn't even realized that Naruto had waltzed into Konoha literally under his nose! That at least gets a brief flutter of smugness. Sasuke's still taller than him by a good few inches, but it perhaps would ultimately all the more satisfying. Sasuke's never claimed to be overwhelmingly mature. The world spins, steadies, and Sasuke takes a breath. Yoko is Naruto. All that careful sidestepping in their conversation above the market, the ever-present mask, that was because Yoko is Naruto. His heart is very, very close to beating right out of his chest. It feels as fast as a hummingbird's wings, but Sasuke is entirely steady, gravity returning, grounded by the sudden, staggering, overwhelming surge of elation, joy, and sweeping satisfaction, and enough glee to practically choke him, all tied up and knotted together with the knowledge that this is Naruto. Naruto, who has spent the last 7 years building a village that at least 5 Jinchuriki called home. Who has another home that isn't Konoha. But that matters so blindingly little right now because Sasuke can hardly even bring himself to think about it. Because Naruto is here. He wants to march over there, interrupt their conversation, and place himself squarely in the center of Naruto's attention. Wants to grab Naruto by the collar of that deceptively neat kimono and punch him in the face. Except that he's too happy for a reaction like that. Wants to grab him by the collar and drag him close and kiss him. Sasuke wants to kiss him, wants to grab him and never let him go, wants to shake him and hug him and hit him and just touch him. Because all Sasuke has wanted since that awful, hideous morning, waking up to a hospital to Naruto's gone, is for Naruto to come back, and he has. He has. Heedless of the crowd around him, of the humidity, of everything beyond the brilliant blonde glowing with life and enthusiasm and standing just 30 feet away, Sasuke tips his head back to the sky and closes his eyes tightly just for a moment. Just for a second, while he doesn't know whether to grin or laugh or cry or rage. Sasuke looks away. And then he looks back because he turned his face away once and his world shattered. Never again. Never